How's it going, everyone? Andrew and Cody are back again. Our first podcast since the dreaded NFC Championship game loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Congratulations to Tom Brady winning his seventh Super Bowl, pretty much establishing himself as the greatest of all time if he wasn't already. But we're not here to really talk about Tampa and the Bucs. We're here to kind of review the Packers season, kind of hand out some of our own personal Kontext gaming awards here uh, for both player and team performance, as well as kind of look ahead and set us up for the off season here. So we'll probably tackle a couple podcasts in the off season, and this will give us a good springboard to get into that over the next coming months. Cody, how's it going?
Well, it's going. We've had a few weeks now for the wounds to heal, and they never really will. I mean that championship game, uh, for me, there's a lot of shades of the 2014 NFC Championship game against Seattle. Just bad coaching decisions costing us the game. Tiny little things. But it is what it is. It was a hell of a ride throughout the season. That's what we're here to talk about today, and we'll close up looking forward to the season ahead, and starting the whole thing up again, and everyone's 0-0.
Yeah,
But yeah, man, I'm. It was a great season, so I'm excited to look back on it and talk about the highs and lows and everything of interest.
yeah. I'll say this is of the. God, I've been a Packer fan for almost 30 years now. Um, this is probably the most entertaining and engaged and interesting season I've had as a Packer fan in a long, long time. I know the podcast and the watch party certainly helped with that, but just being able to watch this team, watch the Matt LaFleur Packers compared to the um, McCarthy or even the Sherman Packers, it's just, I mean, it just looks like they're out there having fun. The chemistry is awesome. LaFleur's got him playing great. He's super creative on offense. Um, it's plus it's fun to watch when you're the highest scoring offense in the league. I mean,
Yes, it is.
yeah, when you're putting up over 30 points every game, it's fun to watch. So it was fun watching Aaron Rodgers win his third MVP. Congratulations to A Raj. Also fun just watching him drop the bombshell that he got engaged over while he's accept the award. So congratulations on that too, man. Um, yeah, it was just a
Let's hope that
fun
girl
season to
keeps doing
watch.
whatever she's doing.
Right, right, and also it was just fun just absorbing all the Packer content. I really enjoyed the Tuesdays with Pat McAfee. I really look forward to watching Aaron Rodgers on those. It was even better that they were winning. We had a 13-3 season, so most of the weeks he was always in a good mood and provided great analysis and insight. Got to see like more into Rodgers as a person, which I really enjoyed, and yeah, it was just a fun season. So
Yeah,
we'll
man.
kind of
Well,
start with just doing
speaking
some.
of the record, 13-3, that's a pretty good segue to our first segment of this podcast, revisiting our predictions.
Yeah. Well, I actually have that towards the end of
Oh,
this
I thought you had it
slideshow.
at the beginning.
So,
My
um,
bad.
to begin, I don't want to give it away, so I'll probably just go right into it. We're doing some awards here. Um, they're kind of like my handpicked awards. Cody might differ a little bit from them. I'm assuming he's probably gonna agree with a good number of them though. But we'll just kind of get jumping right into it. So first is the best game of the season. So this was what I felt was just the offense, defense, special teams playing at their peak. This was the most complete game that we played all season, and it was Week 16 against the Titans where we won 40-14 in prime time. Everyone just like showed up and played well, offense and defense. Devontae had 11 catches, 142 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and it was in the snow. Rodgers had 4 touchdowns. Uh, Jamal Williams was out for this game, but AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones, who just came back from an injury, combined for over 200 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Dillon and Jones almost both had over 100 yards each. Awesome to see. The one thing that I thought was we weren't gonna be able to do was keep Derrick Henry under 100 yards, and we did. Kept him at 98. Jair Alexander shut out Corey Davis, 0 catches, and AJ Brown only had 4 catches for 48 yards. We also intercepted Ryan Tannehill twice, Savage and Kirksey, as well as we got consistent pressure on him too. One of those interceptions came from a Rashawn Gary pressure. Savages did, and it was just a really fun game to watch. Wasn't expecting that. I thought it was gonna be a really tough game for us, and we kind of
Yeah.
blew them out.
Yeah, and I gotta agree. Like that's the best game of the season for that reason. Like we were expecting, like, hey, we've kind of played some soft teams lately.
Mm-hmm.
We're going up against a real playoff team here. It's going to be a test of the team, and we went in there. We just completely blew them out. Showed what this team can look like when it's firing on all cylinders. So yeah, I mean, there were some other great performances throughout the year. I think back to week 3 against the Saints, we pulled out
Yep.
the 37-30 victory. Um, both of the Bears games, we beat them down pretty good. The Niners game was cathartic in a way, like even though we were playing pretty
Yep.
much all their backups, to beat down on them was nice. But yeah, man, this was the game because like the stakes were high. This
Mm-hmm.
was a playoff test, and we just came in and whipped them. And you might some people might argue that the Rams playoff game is was better, um, but I don't think it was as we we played very well that game, but it was
Yeah.
not as complete a performance as this Titans game.
No. Yeah. This is our offense and defense just played lights out. I don't even think we punted once in this game either. I think this was a game where J.K. didn't even get on the field. So just awesome performance by all components. Moving forward, the most entertaining game of the season. So this is just personally what I felt was the most enjoyable game to watch. I was really close to picking the Week 17 game against Chicago just because I purely love to watch us beat the Bears. And we beat them to secure the number 1 seed in Week 17. It was really high on my list, but the Week 4 game I feel like was probably the most entertaining game. Uh, Again, this is also pretty close to a complete game that we played. Um, it was really like when I started to like feel like this was going to be a really special team this year. We went 4-0 with this victory, and we won 30-16 in prime time. Rodgers went off. He only missed 6 passes. He was 27 for 33 for 317 and 4 touchdowns. This was also Big Bob's coming out game. 6 catches for 98 with three touchdowns. It was really nice to see him, as well as Darius Smith. He had 3 sacks and 5 quarterback hits. We also shut out Matt Ryan. No touchdowns from him. He did come close to 300 yards. I think we kept him a little under 300, but no touchdowns. Jair Alexander kind of, started this clinic here where he would like go on this route of shutting down wide receivers throughout the rest of the year. And he started here with Calvin Ridley. No catches on 5 targets in this game. And then Julio only had four for 32. He did re-aggravate an injury, but he would come in and out of the game sporadically on like passing downs only. But Kevin King actually did a surprisingly decent job on Julio in this game, even if he wasn't at 50%. This was just a really fun game to watch. I watched some of the highlights of this prior to putting this together, and I just really remember doing this podcast with you and just how fun it was to watch this
Yeah,
game.
man. I specifically remember being super pumped about Big Bob coming out with this 3 touchdown
Mm-hmm.
performance. And it was not a fluke. He carried that out through the rest of the season. This was his coming out party.
Mm-hmm.
That was super fun to watch. But dude, I am not gonna say this is the most entertaining game of the year. I'm gonna give you 2 different perspectives here. One, uh, one I'll be the negative Nancy. One I'll be pro Packers. So pro Packers, week 1 against Minnesota, man. Coming into the season, let's not forget that we were looking at Minnesota as a potential playoff team. You know, they're offensively stacked, perennially have had a great defense. They had recent success. Um, Minnesota looked like a real challenge, and playing them on the road to open. Uh, we didn't know that they were going to fall apart during the season, but to open up with 43 points on a division rival, uh, especially like let's not forget last season. Yeah, we had 13-3 great year, but Rodgers only threw 26 touchdown passes. It's not like our offense
Mhm.
was dominant. So to start this season with 43 points on the road against a division rival, um, that was really, really entertaining for me. I loved watching that. Uh, but to take the other perspective, a little less pro Packers and more just unbiased, objective entertainment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Indianapolis Colts game was the only overtime game we played all year,
Yeah, it was the only
and
overtime game.
we fought back into it, with the last second Hail Mary to MVS to get into field goal range. And so I mean that game had a little bit of everything because we opened the first half dominating. So you had the
Hmm.
good positive feelings of like, wow, we're whipping a playoff team. And then we let them claw back into it, and your heart's beating, and you're clenching your fists. We lose the lead. We come back to tie it. We go to overtime, and man, if MVS doesn't fumble on that little bubble screen, I think we probably win that game.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, it was a gut punch to lose it, but for pure entertainment value, man, I'm a sucker for overtime, and it's
Yeah.
to only have one overtime game all year, and even like throughout the playoffs, man. Were there any overtime playoff games this year? Like usually there's a
To
few.
be, I don't think there was. I think the closest that there was Indy and Buffalo came close
Yeah.
to overtime. I think that was the only close overtime. I did Washington and Tampa come close to an overtime. I think Washington was in a position to kind of drive down and tie it up, take the overtime, but I think they
Dude,
fell a
it's
little
so
short.
crazy to think that Washington was in a position to beat Tampa, and then Tampa went on to just destroy everybody else on the way to the Super Bowl.
Well, Washington had to the best formula for beating Tampa, which is a dominant four-man rush defensive line and then dropping everyone else back into
I
coverage.
mean, what really impressed me though was their offensive performance with that Heineke, the like third string
Yeah,
quarterback coming in, and like he moved the ball. I
yeah.
mean, maybe there just wasn't enough game tape on him. I don't know,
I don't
but
think. Yeah, he scrambled and picked up some really good yards on some scrambles. I don't think that they were prepared for that.
right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, crazy to think that I'm sitting there. I remember pulling for Washington big time because I also wanted Washington to win because that would have meant that Washington came to Green Bay to play their next game because I think they were a 4 seed. So I feel like that they would have played us. So yeah, I remember really,
Yeah. Well, if
but
ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. But
that's right.
you know,
Moving forward, this is the best offensive individual performance in a game out of all the games. Uh, I mean, there were a few that were really high on my list. Devontae Adams, Tennessee game where he had 11 catches, 3 touchdowns, 142 yards. He had another game, I believe it was against Houston, where he had 14 catches for 192 yards and 2 touchdowns. AJ Dillon's was up there. He had a monster game as well. Rodgers appeared to have a big game every week, and then Big Bob's big 3 touchdown performance in Atlanta was up there. But if you just look at it from a pure statistical standpoint, I gave it to Aaron Jones. Um, he put up over 200 all-purpose yards in this game, as well as 3 touchdowns, 168 on the ground, 68 through the air on 4 receptions, 2 rushing, 1 receiving, and he did put up all those yards with under 20 carries. Just an awesome performance by Aaron Jones. Uh, really
yeah.
fun watching that game.
Was this I believe he had like a big like 75-yard run up the gut in this one, right?
Yeah. Was this could have possibly been the game where he busted a big run right after the second half, unlike the first play of the second half, I believe as well. Could be mistaken with that, but yeah, he had a couple monster rushes in this game. Uh, yeah, I remember specifically saying like, man, we need to re-sign Aaron Jones really bad after this game.
Yeah.
That's looking like it's not going to happen, even though we did offer him a contract that he turned down for that would have made him a top 5 back in the league based on money, but he wasn't going to get the guaranteed money that he wanted, so he turned it down. So it does look like Aaron Jones is probably on his way out the door unless he's willing to come back for a discount, which likely won't happen. But yeah, from I mean, there's a lot of could have handed this out to multiple different people, but I just thought that Aaron Jones deserved this award for this game. It was just a monster game.
Yeah, I mean, this was a year where you could really take your pick. With Jones had multiple dominant games, Adams had multiple dominant games. Um, I mean, Jair Alexander's performance in the
Yeah,
NFC Championship game was next level. Um, so it's difficult to pick, but yeah, I'm probably gonna go with like Devontae just abusing the Texans.
yeah.
Um, like just I mean there were points at this season where it just people always complain about like, oh, why is Rodgers locking into Devontae? But like
He's just
when
always
you just
open.
literally can't stop the guy
Yeah.
and he's putting up 200 receiving yards. Um, I mean he had I think it gets lost a little bit in Rodgers having this MVP year, which is interesting that Rodgers like he put together this MVP year with like just consistently great performances, but he never had like a spectacular like 6 touchdown game. It was a
No,
lot of like
the
3 or
most he
4
ever had was
touchdowns.
4 passing touchdowns in a game. I
Yeah.
think there was a game too where he added in like a rushing touchdown as well, but for passing touchdowns it was 4. That's the highest. I mean, he did it multiple times, but 4 was the
Yeah.
highest.
So it's like I think it gets lost a little bit with his MVP season, but dude, Devonte Adams, the year he had this year, like it's historic. One of the best receiving seasons of all time.
Hmm.
And he was injured for 2.5 games, probably not at full strength for more than that. I mean, watching this guy play this year was just it, it was a treat,
Hmm.
and I hope we get to continue watching it for years to come.
Hopefully we can get an extension done in there, and they're talking to him right now. As I said, this was the best offensive individual performance. I wanted to give one to a defensive side as well. That goes to Zadarius Smith. Um, I actually got that wrong. It's not week 2 versus the Lions. I just got that. I duplicated the slide and I forgot to edit that. It'd be week 4 against the Falcons. He had 3 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss, and 8 total tackles. I mentioned it in the stats earlier. Um, you could have also put out Jair Alexander's multiple shutdowns in like any game. Just like pick a game. This game with Calvin, he did it against Chris Godwin. He did it against Corey Davis. I mean, he just shut down receivers all year. He's certainly up there, but in terms of a stat line, uh, I mean, Zadarius just wrecked this game. He was just
Yeah.
always in the backfield, just always like even when he wasn't getting sacks or tackles for losses, like Matt Ryan was just running for his life back there. Uh, they couldn't get anything going on the ground. They just couldn't block the guy. It was just awesome to watch. So that's the reason that we won by multiple scores in this game is because Zadarius came to play in prime time and really helped keep them out of the end zone and really killed a lot of drives. So that's my award
Yeah.
for the best defensive individual performance.
I mean, it's really difficult to argue with those stats, and Z, he did just blow that game up. Um, but I'm gonna go with Jair Alexander. Um, And so I'm kind of torn, but he had so many just shut down performances against top tier receivers. Um,
I
but
think
he didn't have a
that's a
ton of
good
games
topic.
where he was making splash plays. And I want to the games where he did make splash plays. Um, it was just like the defense just had a completely different attitude, and uh, so I'm trying to look up stats as I'm
Well, if you
talking
wanna,
here.
I actually did look at because he was high. You could point out the NFC Championship game where he had 2 interceptions in that game. I did watch those. Brady did kind of just like chuck him up, and Jared made a good play intercepting them, but they weren't like really difficult interceptions to
Oh
make.
yeah,
He
so that's where I'm torn here. Between the NFC Championship game where he did come down with 2 picks against Tom Brady, but you're right. Like and this is actually why I hate when people were like, "Oh, the defense. Like, why would we fire Patton? The defense picked Brady off 3 times. The defense did not force those. We had no pressure on Brady.
no.
It was just Brady like threw up some bad passes for some reason,
Well,
and we
Brady,
happened to be in the right place.
we got the ball in our red zone on both those interceptions too. Like Brady, I don't know if he did this on purpose. I assume he does because he's so freaking smart. Those interceptions were about as good as punts. They were like 30-yard bombs he did both times, and they were at the 50. They were at midfield both times. So even if it gets intercepted, it's like, all right, I took a chance. We're already up. You know what? If he catches that, this game's over with right now. If not, oh well, they get the ball in their own red zone. I saw about that. You should probably also consider Jair Alexander's Week 1 performance
Well,
against
yeah, so that's
Minnesota.
actually that's exactly what I was going to say. Those are the 2 games I'm considering. The NFC
Yeah.
Championship, he comes down with 2 interceptions. Lets us hang in the game. He pretty much single-handedly gives us a chance to win.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, like the picks, they were more interceptions of opportunity
Yep.
rather than great plays. If you go back to Week 1, and this is what I'm talking about, like he had great stats against the Falcons in Week 4, but Week 1 Jair Alexander coming in on that blitz for the safety on Kirk Cousins, it changed the flow of that game. And that was Week 1. It was Week 1. It changed the flow of that game, and I think it set a tone for the season. And unfortunately, Mike Patton, he, we've discussed this many times throughout the year that was not a designed blitz. Jair, he freelanced on it, gambled, and made a play. But Mike Patton did not want to play that aggressive kind of defense. And but we saw throughout the year when Jair was allowed to play aggressively, when Za'Darius was allowed to play aggressively, good things happen, man. And I loved that Week 1, just a single play that tilted the game.
Mm-hmm.
And no player on our defense plays as aggressively as Jair Alexander, and that play was the epitome of it. So I'm gonna go with Week 1 as Alexander.
Yep.
And what I was looking up the stats for, and I don't want to sit here and take up a bunch of time trying to find it. Did he have an interception in
Yes.
Week 1 as well?
Yeah. He had an
Okay,
interception and a safety sack.
yeah, man. So that's that's a hell of a performance, and
Yep.
the guy's just getting better.
Yep. Moving on, best coaching decision of the year. Um, I mean, there's a lot. Um, I really contemplated not really going with like a player one. I thought about going with LaFleur's. Like if you've noticed, LaFleur does a really good job of just having a good pulse with his team and knowing what they need. Our injuries were up a little bit this year, but they've still been down where keeping players healthy and not having them out for like the entire season has really helped get this record. So I've noticed that the injuries are down under the floor, and that's a good coaching decision on his part, is knowing how to manage his players. But I thought for the on-field production standpoint, um, Kirksey got hurt, and then he did get healthy, and we kind of reinserted him right back in. But Chris Barnes was clearly just the better linebacker, the best inside linebacker on our team this year. And once they made that decision to keep him as the Mike inside linebacker and then move Kirksey to the off to the weak side and inside linebacker there. You just saw our defense just kind of really hit its stride there late in the season. I thought that was probably the best decision, coaching decision of the year, and really kind of like got our defense to kind of trend upwards finally. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not gonna argue with that. Just because, like, I'm trying to think of like individual calls throughout the year, and the bad ones are what stand out to me.
mhm.
As far as good ones, like when we were winning, most of the time we were winning by multiple scores. It's not like we had a lot of really tight games where LaFleur made a gutsy call
Nope.
that brought us through. Um, so yeah, dude, I gotta agree. Putting Chris Barnes in, and then actually like Kirksey did come back, but he shifted his role. Instead of being the Mike linebacker, he became the Will, and he
Yeah.
started making plays in that position.
Yep.
Um, y- actually,
Kudos.
all right. So I will. I'm gonna change what I say here. Um, it's a negative that it ever even had to come up, but the fact that the players went to Mike Pettin and said, "Hey, we got to change something. We're not. This is too complicated. We want to simplify things, play more aggressively." And Patton listened, and he switched up the defense a little. I mean, it took Matt LaFleur chewing him out. It took the players coming directly to him, but eventually he did decide to change up the defense, and we started playing way better. I'll give the man props for being humble enough to change things up
Hey,
when it was clear it needed to
hey,
happen.
we did have a top 10 defense this year. We finished ninth. Um, it's not that we had a bad season defensively. I don't even want to say that Patton's a bad defensive coordinator. I just think he makes really bad. He's a bad situational defensive coach. He's the one in charge of calling the defensive plays. He usually would come up with a pretty decent game plan. I know playing off with his corners like every game was just infuriating and just not being aggressive. I get why he did it because the offense was so dominant and just, he had the complete faith in the offense, but situational calls, and they were on prime example in the AFC Championship. I mean, just, you had a good game plan. You just got to make better calls type thing.
Yeah, I
So,
mean we can talk about Mike Patton more when we
yeah.
get to the Joe Barry section of this. But yeah, I've got some things to say about him.
Well, we'll
uh,
talk a little bit more about Mike Patton right now.
okay.
Um, the worst coaching decision of the year, I think, started in the very beginning of the year because it ended up being, I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? But NFC Championship game last year, we go 13-3, we get blown out of the water, we get run all over for like almost like 300 yards against the 49ers. In that game, people are calling for Mike Patton's head, uh, wanted him gone for whatever reason. Matt LaFleur decided to stick with him for one more year to see what he would do. Yes, he had a top 10 defense, and yes, he improved the defense.
Top 10 yardage,
The
not
top 10
top 10
yardage.
scoring.
But again, Mike Patton's ineptitude in a big important game reared its ugly head and pretty much kind of cost us that game as well. I mean, LaFleur's to blame too with his play calling on offense, which was surprisingly ineffective. But again, I think that we held on to him for a year too long. We should have
Yeah.
got rid of him last year.
So I agree with that. It's clear that I was calling for his head after the Niners embarrassment. We did hold on to him too long, but for me, I have to go with a specific play. 6 seconds left in the half, and the Bucks aren't even in field goal range yet, and you dial up single high coverage, and Kevin King has been getting abused all game long, and you single him up against the Tampa Bay receivers. It it's one of the worst coaching calls I've ever seen.
Oh
Greg
yeah.
Williams had a similar call when he was with the Jets and they were playing the Raiders earlier in the year. He got fired the next day. It's situational football, man. You the one thing you cannot do there is give up the touchdown. It's the one thing. Tampa had no timeouts. So you don't even have to defend the middle of the field. You defend the end zone and the sidelines, and somehow Patton dials up this. He had his safeties in the like the middle of the field, not deep,
Mhm.
but like the lower middle of the field. I have no idea on earth what was he thinking there. It's going to go down as one of the worst play calls in Green Bay Packers history.
Y-
Um,
and
yeah, LaFleur, like he could have gone for it on 4th and 8 at the end of the game. That was a bad decision not to, but he did get the ball. Like he had a chance to get the ball back if not for the Kevin King penalty. Um, and also I'll fault LaFleur for both times we played Tampa. He did not adjust and give his offensive tackles help. It was clear
mhm.
that our tackles were getting manhandled, and LaFleur did not leave tight ends or running backs in to chip. So, really bad decision there. But, dude, Mike Patton, end of the first half, NFC Championship, that's a play call that's going to live in infamy.
Yeah, Mike Patton will forever be haunted by that. I what did surprise me is how often do you see at the end of a half or end of a fourth quarter, a team, the offense will take a timeout and then talk about the play they want to run and come up with it, and they'll go out there, and then the defense will see what they're in, and then they will take a timeout and then adjust accordingly. I don't recall taking a timeout to when we saw what they were in. Like he called the cover one, and it's like, all right, cool call. Like we don't need to use a timeout to see what they're gonna run. They're probably just gonna run a 5 yard out and hit like one of the receivers for a field goal. Like it's Tom Brady in a big game. Of course, he's gonna want to take a
Well, dude,
shot.
and that's even more damning against Mike Patton. That how many quarterbacks would have 6 seconds left on the clock with no timeouts in a tight game and say, I only have time to throw one ball. I'm gonna take a shot for the end zone. No, dude. Most guys they're gonna take the quick out so that they can get the field goal attempt. Brady had no fear. He knew
Mm-mm.
exactly where to attack. Like he abused our defense all game until for some reason in the fourth quarter he decided to start throwing some bad passes for the interceptions. But dude, it was just he had Patton's number
Mm-hmm.
and
Tom Brady's always had
yeah.
Patton's number, no matter where he's been. Patton's never been able to like play a good defensive game against Tom Brady. Not when he was with Cleveland, not when he was with the Jets. Brady's always demolished Patton. I'm just it is what it is.
I think we
Uh,
talked enough about that call.
best roster move of the year. I thought it was just a tie between two. Cutting Jimmy Graham. Thank God. Would never got the Big Bob show if we held on Jimmy Graham for another year. Great move by Goot there. Jimmy Graham played pretty good in Chicago this year, but it was the right move. And then, man, is hindsight not 2020 or what? Not overpaying for Will Fuller at the trade deadline, who I believe got suspended for the rest of the year for
Yeah, it
using
was like 1 or 2 weeks later got
yeah,
suspended for the rest of the
rest
year.
of the season. And the Texans like wanted like a second round draft pick or something like that for him, or I think a third. I think they were like they eventually kind of agreed to like maybe doing it for a third rounder or something. And Green Bay was still like, nah, that's too much. Uh, Even then, probably knew that they weren't going to be able to re-sign him anyway. He would have just been a rental to try to make a Super Bowl run. But wow, am I glad, because that would have been a wasted pick. Even if it was like a 6th rounder or something like that, it just wouldn't wasted. So
Yeah,
for
dude. I
once,
mean,
it worked out.
honestly, I'm gonna say we kind of lucked out on that one. I don't necessarily think it was like a great personnel decision because we were pursuing Fuller hard. Goot
Mhm.
wanted him. Sorry, my lights just started freaking out for
I
some
saw that.
reason.
That's weird.
Goot just started freaking like he was freaking out and just like, all right, well, I want Fuller and I'm going to get him. And I believe it was we were willing to offer a third, but the Texans wanted a second. Um, so we really lucked out there. But I'm gonna pick a controversial roster move as the best of the year. Uh, I know a lot of Packers fans hated this move, and they say, we were in the NFC Championship game against the Niners. You got to go get Aaron Rodgers help, and now they say, we made it to the NFC Championship game against the Bucks, and what if Rodgers had help? I'm saying Jordan Love was that help. I think the drafting of Jordan Love, especially the move up to get him, I think it was calculated. Yes, we want him as a potential future franchise quarterback. We see that potential and to mold him. Um, but you're at the end of the first round. How many guys are going to come in and give an MVP level performance? That's pretty much not going to happen. You have a quarterback with a history of MVP performances who's been playing kind of off for the past few years, but he also has a history of having massive chips on his shoulders and
Mhm.
and trying to show people up. I say drafting Jordan Love pissed Aaron Rodgers off. I don't care how professionally he played it. He was pissed and he said, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make the team regret this. And right now, he's got all the leverage and he wants to try to renegotiate his contract supposedly. But dude, I think Jordan Love motivated the one of the best quarterback seasons that the NFL's ever seen, and that we had the pleasure of watching Aaron Rodgers deliver this year.
I believe this was perhaps his best statistical season apart from maybe his 2011 season. But yeah,
It's very
um,
close. Yeah.
yeah, really close. So yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to be said in that. I really think it like re-put another chip on his shoulder that he hasn't had since his draft day slide. So yeah, for sure. Um, my biggest offensive surprise player of the year was a guy I kind of wrote off. I thought we kind of overpaid for him there when I was really surprised why we went out and gave him like $8 million a year for like like a journeyman offensive lineman, and like supposedly he was the first call that Goop made when free agency opened, and that was yeah, it's crazy. Your house is haunted or something, man. Um, Billy Turner, man, he was really unsung hero of the offense this year. We did have some injuries along the offensive line. Bach was hurt multiple times throughout the year. I believe Corey Linsley was hurt. Rick Wagner dealt with some injuries. Um, Lucas Patrick was hurt for a little bit, as well as losing Lane Taylor. I mean, our offensive line did take a hit this year, but Billy Turner was a rock. He was hurt to start the year off too. Actually, he missed week 1 and week 2, but he ended up playing in every game after that. He had 884 snaps, and in those 14 games he played, he only allowed 2 sacks, only had 3 penalties. He did have 25 total pressures, but really, I mean, he was just awesome. He was just a rock. Really surprised at how solid he was for us. And playing multiple positions too. Like he would bump from right tackle to right guard. Um, in fact, I think the only position that he didn't play this year was probably center. I think he even bumped to left tackle at one point, and I think he might have bumped to left guard when we moved Alton Jenkins to center at one for like one game. So yeah, he played all of the line and he played awesome. So Billy Turner's my pick for
Yeah, man,
surprise offensive player of the year.
that's that's a great pick. I really agree with you there because his 2019 season, it was all right. I
Yeah, it was
kind
just
of thought we
okay.
overpaid for him.
Yeah,
Um, and I mean, I could make an argument for Robert Tunyon. I mean, I don't think many people were looking at him as the starter, let alone a Pro Bowl worthy player.
yeah.
Um, I think at the beginning of the year I said he's either going to be our number one tight end or our number four.
Yeah.
Just the true definition of a dark horse. And yeah, he showed up big time. Um, But yeah, dude, Billy Turner, um, he, I think I like him playing at tackle more than guard.
Same.
2019 he played guard and he was all right. Um, his ability to step in and play guard super valuable. But when he was at right tackle and Bakhtiari was at left, that's when we were playing our best.
Hmm.
The fact that he also was able to bump over to left tackle when Bach got huge. I mean, Billy Turner had an incredible year. That's I it's kind of interesting that like why were the coaches playing him at guard to begin with? I mean, I guess
They said that they were going to play their best five linemen, and
yeah,
I mean it's clear that Billy Turner is in our top five easily. Um, we just, I mean, at full strength, we just had two tackles who really couldn't really play guard. So Billy Turner being versatile still gave us a top five lineup at guard, I guess. So I mean,
yeah,
I get it, but yeah, he is definitely better at right tackle. I think it's just the fact that Rick Wagner can't play guard and Bach Yari can't play guard, and like, why would you with Bach?
or yeah,
But
or going back to 2019, it was Bach and Beloga at
yeah, and
tackle.
yeah, you're
Um,
not going to put him. I mean, Balaga is probably still a better right tackle, I think, but man, you
when
couldn't ask for
healthy.
much more than Billy Turner for $8 million a year. You know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I'm
so
glad this man is on the team.
yeah,
Which I last year I probably wouldn't have said that. So definitely a surprise.
yep. My biggest defensive surprise player of the year, Chris Barnes. I mean, how can you not? There's lots of surprise players who kind of jumped up all over, but there's a difference between surprise player and most improved player. Most improved player is a player that we expected to probably get better at some point because he had the potential. Surprise player is just a guy who comes out of nowhere and you don't expect it from him really. And that's Chris Barnes. He was an undrafted free agent. Uh, he not only supplemented multiple other players. I mean, we drafted a linebacker in the fourth round with Kamal Martin, jumped over him. We gave Oren Burks a chance at it earlier in the year. He jumped in front of him, and not only that, he jumped in front of Christian Kirksey, who we paid like $8 million a year to be like that stud inside linebacker. And Chris Barnes ended up being the best inside linebacker on our team. And for all intents and purposes, I'm excited to see if he can even take another jump and maybe be like a just this hidden gem that we
Yeah,
found
man. I
since like Sam Shield days. So
Yeah, I don't know how we could go with anyone else. Like
mhm.
I will say I was surprised that Preston Smith took such a big step backward.
Yep.
But Chris Barnes coming in as an undrafted free agent, I didn't even know how to pronounce his name the first game he started making plays. Um, yeah, dude, he was huge. He was a huge part of this defense, huge surprise. The game's not too big for him, and it's there's a history of Pro Bowl level undrafted middle
Mhm.
linebackers. You look back at like London Fletcher, you know, went undrafted because he was a little bit undersized. He
Mhm.
had a decade plus NFL career with multiple Pro Bowls. Um, maybe that's in the cards for Chris Barnes. He's a little bit undersized, but the guy's got instincts. He knows how to call the defense. Um, just a complete game changer for our defense. I'm excited to see him grow.
I wasn't able to get like rankings and stuff for the entire season, but I was able to find at some point, either around like the halfway point of the season or a specific quarter, Chris Barnes was in the top five for highest graded rookie defensive players, and he was an undrafted player, and he was the second highest inside linebacker out of the rookie class, right
You know,
next to
and
Patrick Queen. So,
so I'm curious where you got these stats from because I had seen some different stats in regards to Patrick Queen, rating him as one of the worst linebackers in the league, like something like 88th out of 90 something.
I think he did step off in the second half of the season. I believe what I found was probably right around the midpoint of the season. Now I will send you the info that I found after the podcast here, so you can check it out.
Yeah, I mean regardless, it's clear that value-wise, getting
Mhm.
Chris Barnes undrafted versus taking Patrick Queen round one, we got the better deal there.
For
And
sure.
and I know people are down on Jordan Love, even if you don't buy into my psychological argument about
Mhm.
him motivating Rodgers. There's still a chance that he does become a franchise quarterback. We don't
Yeah.
know. You got to give the kid time. He's
Yeah.
sitting behind Rodgers and learning. So, people were down on the Jordan Love pick. I don't think Patrick Queen would have been the missing piece on this team,
He wouldn't
especially
have
when
been the
Chris
game
Barnes.
changer. I
Yeah,
mean, as good as Patrick Queen is, I mean, he's not like Devin White. He's not like a Devin White type player. He's good, but he's not Devin White. I mean, Devin White's going to be the next like Luke Kuechly of this league, if he's not already. I mean, that guy's just unreal. Best inside linebacker in the game probably right now already, which is
yeah. I
crazy.
think
But
I think one of the Tampa Bay coaches who used to be on like the early 2000s Ravens says that Devin White reminds him of a young Ray Lewis.
yeah, I believe it. I mean, he's probably even better than like um, Edmonds there in Buffalo. Who,
Yeah,
so I mean, he's a solid player too. Anyway, moving forward, uh, most improved player on the team. I'm splitting this one. I'm giving it to the 2019 first round draft pick class. That's Rashawn Gary and Darnell Savage. Both of them played like first rounders this year. Both of them vastly improved. Um, and they look like franchise pieces for this defense to pair with like Kenny Clark, Zadarius, and Jair and Adrian. I mean, we have a very talented piece with these guys. Darnell Savage from week 1 to week 16, Darnell Savage may have been the most improved player on the team throughout the in season. Rashawn Gary came out week 1, looked significantly better from his rookie year, earned more and more playing time, and towards the end of the year, he beat out Preston Smith, who only started 14 games this year. Rashawn Gary finally, towards the end of the year, uh, supplanted him as a starter. Rashawn Gary looking like uh, just a premier edge rusher in the making going into year 3. I'm really excited to see what both of them um, can can do with another off season and another full year. So those are my personal picks for most improved player on the team. So
yeah, yeah. So that's an interesting way to make the distinction there. You're sort of looking at from week one to end of the season who improved most in
mhm,
that stretch, where you could also look at it like from last year to this year.
mhm.
Uh, if you look at it from last year to this year, um, guys like Big Bob Tunyon and Lucas Patrick, these were guys who were, you know, people probably wouldn't have cared if they were cut. We looked at them as like backups, like uh, almost practice squad material. And they came into this year and very early on just grabbed a hold of starting jobs and played at a phenomenal level all year long. So it's hard to argue with either one of them for year over year. Uh, but yeah, if you take a from week one to the end of the season, um, both Savage and Gary started out with growing pains, particularly Savage.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of the year, they were making plays. And I mean, Gary, if Gary keeps growing, man, he's going to be better than Sedarius soon.
Gary's going to break the bank on a contract extension. I think if he keeps progressing at the rate he's progressing. So I'm excited for both these guys. Um, Most disappointing player. So now I'm moving into the most disappointing player. One for offense, the next one will be for defense. On the offensive side, for me personally, it's Jay Sternberger. This was a guy who in our preseason hype video, I was really hyping him up as being our number one tight end, making a big jump. I didn't expect him to you know be elite by any means because he's only going into his second year. It takes at least 3 years usually for tight ends to kind of you know you know get acclimated and really start to show their potential. But Sternberger seemed, I know he had the concussion, cost him 4 games, but he never really showed any growth throughout the year. it even was so bad that LaFleur was deactivating. He was game day inactive. He'd be healthy, but wasn't active. He ended up playing in 12 games. He started none, and he finished the year with 12 receptions for 114 yards and a touchdown. So the man only averaged about one catch for, like one catch for 10 yards per game. It's just not what you would expect out of a tight end that you draft in the third round, so it
Yeah,
seemed
man.
to,
I don't think he can pick any other offensive player. Jay
mm-mm.
Sternberger was by far the biggest disappointment. I didn't expect the guy to be a Pro Bowler, but I expected him to be an important role player on the offense, and instead he pretty much completely disappeared. And at this point, his multiple concussions in his very short career, it would not surprise me if he's out of the league after next year.
And that would really suck because we did spend a day two pick on him. I mean, when we cut Jimmy Graham, I thought that Gutekunst cut Jimmy Graham specifically because he thought that Jay Sternberger could make that jump and be our starting tight end. Now, thank God for Robert Tunyon making the jump he did and really, having a Pro Bowl year. He's, it's his job to lose now. I do hope Sternberg can, at least turn it around and be a contributor, like a
Yeah,
role
I mean,
player
he's
for us.
got
And
physical tools.
yeah,
He's fast. He can catch the ball, even though he's
mm-hmm.
suffered a lot of drops this year. I mean, that was his calling card in college. He was pretty much a big wide receiver.
Yeah,
If we could add that element to our offense with Tunyon, with Degura, uh, it'd be huge. So hopefully it was just the injuries and confidence thing this year, and he comes back strong next year.
yeah.
But I genuinely, the number of concussions he's had and the amount of time that they've kept him out of games, it really makes me think that maybe he's just not cut out for the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on to defense here. Uh, Preston Smith, most disappointing player of the year in defense. I even went as far as to provide a little snapshot of his stats from last year to this year. He was really a critical component. Looked like a home run free agent signing by Goot. Him and Zadarius formed, one of the most solid formidable pass rush duos in the NFL last year. Really took a back seat this year, declined a little bit, and towards the end of the year lost his job to Rashawn Gary more or less. I know that his usefulness doesn't always show up in the stat sheet. I do know that Mike Patton used him more in coverage this year than he did last year, but when he blitzed, specifically just look at the number of blitzes, he blitzed almost the same amount. He blitzed more this year than he did last year, and the numbers still weren't there though. So he played in 16 games, so he's been healthy. Snaps have been about the same, over between 8 and 900 each years. But his tackles were down. His tackles for loss were down. He only had a third of the sacks he had last year. He only had half of the QB hits. Didn't intercept anything this year. He did have one more passes defense this year. You would expect a whole lot more from that, from the number of times he was asked to drop back, though. And he blitzed more. So I'm not sure, man. He looks like a player who's gonna be cut here. We would free up $8 million in cap space if we cut him, and we would incur a $2 million dead cap penalty in doing so. But I mean, with us now $20 million under the cap, um, he just seems like the ideal target to probably get caught here, especially with Gary on the team and Z still. So I
Yeah,
don't
I
know,
mean,
man.
you want to have a nice pass
Yeah.
rush rotation, but running the financial numbers, I don't see any way that Preston Smith is still on this team next
Yeah.
year. Um, yeah, and it's like I get that sacks, like your sacks are going to fluctuate from year to year. You're not always going to have a 12 sack year, but you would hope that you're still getting hits and pressures. But he just went down across the board. Uh, just really stepped back big time. Maybe he was playing with an injury that we don't know about.
Could be.
Hard to say, But whatever the case is, financially speaking, he's probably gone. It is a little interesting though to that the excuse of Patton dropping him in the coverage came up because I also remember when Clay Matthews was in the Mike Patton defense. I think it was his last year with the Packers, and his sacks went down dramatically. And he kind of complained that like, well, I'm playing the way I'm asked to. You know, Patton's not an aggressive guy. He's not gonna go out and say, "All right, man, you go get the quarterback." He he makes players fit the system rather than having the system fit his players.
Right.
Um, but yeah, man, Preston Smith, huge disappointment. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah. I mean, just has too big of a cap hit. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe, you know, maybe they work something out. Maybe he takes a pay cut or something. I'm not sure. I'm not gonna say that, like, he's 100% out the door.
Dude,
Uh,
unless he plays for vet minimum, like
I
he's
don't know.
gone.
We'll
I just
see.
hope maybe we can get a seventh round pick trading him. But
Maybe.
honestly, probably just a cut.
Maybe. Yeah. Moving forward, I'm going to give a bonus most disappointing player of the year, which is J.K. Scott. I mean, anytime you draft a punter, not even like higher than the seventh round too. Like we took, I believe, he was a comp pick in the fifth or sixth round.
Fifth, yeah, I
But
think fifth.
yeah, but a punter, and he's been so inconsistent. He'll have one great punt and follow up with just a shank the next. He's just inconsistent, dude. And then his blunders in I forgot the game there, but um, tossing it to Crosby on that muffed kick, and then Crosby having to give it back to him. It's just, I mean, but from a punting standpoint, he's been inconsistent, dude. I would not be. I can almost guarantee you that Green Bay will bring in punting competition
Yeah.
next year. I'm not saying that JK's gone. He's still a rookie punter. They'll probably try to get as much tread out of him as they can, but I guarantee they'll have at least another punter in camp next year to at least give him competition. So
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, he's got talent. He's just been inconsistent. So they're probably gonna bring in some competition to
mm,
see how he responds.
yeah,
But yeah, dude, there were multiple games this year where our special teams were a major liability, and a big part of that was the punting unit.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. When you draft a punter in the actual draft, um, you the expectation is that he can flip the field on every single punt, and he did not flip the field. Um, he was everything but that. So now we're nearing the end of our podcast here. That's it for the awards here.
well,
Well,
hey, before we get to this, I want to add in one bonus award here.
sure.
Uh, Individual best play of the year. And if you need a minute to think about it, um, I can go
Yeah,
with
you better go first.
I'll actually I'm I can think of two different instances where I would give it to Alan Lazard both times. One being the third quarter bomb touchdown in the divisional playoff game against the Rams.
Yeah, it's up there.
Kind of broke the game open. And then another being his, he had just a baller performance in week 3 against the Saints. Uh, and he had another just like dagger bomb touchdown in that game. Um, like we like to talk about MBS, like he's his bread and butter is big plays. Uh, but Lazard, considering he was out half the year with a core injury, uh, he had a lot of memorable plays this year. He had a lot of tough chain moving plays this year, and he is our most willing and effective blocker at receiver.
Mhm.
So yeah, man, he's a heck of a player. He's gonna keep getting better. But yeah, dude, those two bomb touchdowns were just they felt like daggers, and I love those kind of plays.
Well, the one that kind of just came to me off the top of my head is Given the score of the game and the flow of the game and how high scoring it was, I believe it came down to a one-score game. Jair Alexander, impromptu safety week 1 against Minnesota. If he doesn't do that, not only do we not get the 2 points, but we don't get the ball back. Who knows if they march down and score on that? But I believe we won 43 to 30 something. They were pretty high up in the 30s. I think it was a one-score game. So I think that's a possible game-winning play that he made in the middle of the game. So I would say that's probably and then winning week 1 is such a big, step in the right direction. It's just I think you said earlier in this podcast, it just set our season off in motion. I think that right there was a catalyst for what the rest of the season was going to be for us. So I feel actually the more I talk about it, the more comfortable I am with picking that play. So
yeah, it was a hell of a play, and I hope our new defensive coordinator puts Jair in positions to make aggressive plays like that more often.
And we will talk about that in just a bit, actually, because we will be talking about Joe Barry, I believe, in the very next slide. So I'm going to kind of just give lip service to this. I won't go through and just talk through every single game, but you can see it on the screen here. We started off the year, correct with our predictions. We were both wrong with our week 3 one. And then we were, it wasn't until week 6 that we kind of started to divvy some stuff up. I was correct in that we would lose to Tampa. You predicted that we would win.
Yeah, I believe I also predicted that Tom Brady's age would start showing in the team.
Yeah, I highly encourage you to go back and watch what you said about the Buccaneers. It was highly entertaining to hear your analysis on it. I was a little bit off too on some things, but yeah, hey, Tampa, whew, Tom Brady hasn't missed much of anything.
Too early in my predictions, and next year the wheels are going to fall.
You did predict a Houston loss in week 7, and that's totally understandable. Houston had a terrible year, but they were projected. They were all in. They traded 2 first-round picks for Tunzel. They were all in. Surprising to see the season that they had, but yeah, they're a dumpster fire right now.
Their team has more talent than the year they had. It's just they have organizational dysfunction. I mean, to the point where when all your star players want to be cut or traded, it's clear that something has been festering in that organization for a while.
For sure.
And they're going to have to it's going to be a true tear down and rebuild, the likes of which you don't see very often.
Halfway through the year, I'm looking at week 8 against Minnesota. We were completely on par with the actual results. We were 5-2 in our analysis predictions, and Green Bay was actually 5-2 as well. In week 8, we had them both winning against Minnesota and actually lost that game. That ended up being our trap game there in week 8. We had no idea that San Francisco was going to be decimated by injuries the way they were. So we both predicted a loss in week 9. They ended up winning that game. And then after that, we were both correct in week 10. We did both predict a Colts win. We did say it was going to be really close, though. We did say it was going to be a lot closer, probably a one-score game, and it was. And we should have won that game. But in week 11, we were, again, once tied up with the actual Packers. We were actually 7-3 in week 11. I was really bullish on the Bears. I thought that the Bears were going to be way better than what they were this year. I actually had them getting swept. The Packers getting swept by the Bears. We ended up sweeping the Bears. So
dude, I'm pissed that I predicted 2 years in a row of divisional sweeps, and if it wasn't for that damn Minnesota game, I would have been right.
Yeah, it was close. I mean, it would have been. I don't think any coach has ever had back-to-back sweeps in history. I don't think so. Going into week 13 there, wins across the board. Week 14 wins across the board again. You're keeping pace with the actual Packers all the way until week 15 there, when you did predict a Panthers loss. You did say it was going to be really close. You did predict that was going to be a trap game for them.
And it was, but thankfully we pulled it out despite sloppy play. If they
That
had
second half
Christian
was
Christian McCaffrey
terrible.
playing, might have been different.
Yeah, that second half against Carolina was I don't know what the fuck happened to Green Bay in that second half, but the coaching and the execution were just terrible in the second half of the Carolina game. Uh, Came really close to losing that game when we should have blown them out. They didn't even have Christian McCaffrey in that game, so I just no explanation. Uh, Titans, I did predict a win against Tennessee. You predicted a loss. They ended up being just dominant, winning that
Yeah,
game.
I think that was like the one game that I was like wavering most over. I'm like, oh man, it'll
Yep,
be a tight one. Uh,
yep. You
that
wavered a lot
turned out
on
to
it,
be our best game of the year.
and then we would just also flip on week 17. You had them winning against the Bears. I had them losing again. Green Bay would actually win. We ended up being both 11-5. Green Bay actually went 13-3. We were close. Few games here and there, but yeah, there you
Yeah,
go,
man, I
guys.
think it's interesting that, when we go back to 2019, a lot of people said that our roster kind of overachieved getting to the NFC Championship game, and then obviously got blown out by the Niners. So I was expecting a little bit of a regression. Like some people were saying, like, oh, they're going to be a 7-9 team. I'm like, that's bullshit. But I expected a bit of regression. The fact that we came out and had a second 13-3 season, that gives me a lot of faith in Matt LaFleur as a coach, and just the team chemistry. So even though next year our schedule is probably going to be harder and we're losing talent, um, I'm going to try to take a more optimistic prediction next year. I don't know if we get 13-3 for a third year in a row, but we'll have another podcast for that. But I'm
Yeah,
gonna try to more
I was
towards
gonna
that.
say I'm already looking forward to doing that podcast with the game predictions once we get through training camp and we start to see what the roster looks like after the draft and free agency. Um, as you said, we're losing talent due to the cap, as well as on paper, our schedule is even harder than it was this year. But things change. I don't see us going 13-3, but I obviously didn't see us going 13-3 this year either. So
Yeah, who knows?
who
Maybe we'll
knows?
go 14-2.
Maybe, man. Who knows? Um, that'll bring us to our new defensive coordinator, which is not who I thought we would get. In fact, anyone who's read my first blog I wrote, I did type up a very long piece on top 10 candidates for defensive coordinator with um, Jim Leonard being my top choice. He's the former safety turned defensive coordinator for his alma mater, Wisconsin Badgers, and he has really revolutionized that defense. So much to the point where Matt LaFleur was willing to uh, not even start him off as a positional coach in the NFL, just literally going to give him the keys to the defensive coordinator. I mean, that's a tough jump to go from defensive coordinator in college to the NFL, but I mean, he's been that good in college. Obviously, he turned the job down, and just surprised that Joe Barry was his backup option out of all the guys he could have had. And hired him, as you'll probably make a reference to this too, Cody, hired him before the Super Bowl. Um, Bucks had a pretty good. I know they have a ton of talent on defense, but they got some pretty good coaches too. So surprised we didn't at least interview any of them. Um, it's just a surprise hire. Running through these bullet points, you can see his resume is nothing to fucking write home to ma about. It's pretty shitty. Like, no, dude, it's really shitty. Uh, um, he was defense coordinator in Detroit for 2 years. His defense ranked 32nd in both points and yards allowed. Uh, I know his leading tackler in both those years was inside linebacker Paris Lennon, who was like an undrafted free agent from us who got cut. I mean, yeah, he didn't have much talent in either place, but again, I adhere very strongly to the notion that really good coaches get the most out of their players and can turn an average player into a good player by utilizing his talents the best way. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like he was able to do that. in any of his stints. And in Washington, he fared a little bit better because he had better talent, but still, his defense ranked 28th in points allowed both years, and then 17th and 19th respectively in yards allowed. Yeah, he runs the Vic Fangio system. Rodgers is a big fan of the Vic Fangio system. I wonder if
So
maybe that played into it, but
I want to jump in here for a minute, Drew, just because before we get too deep into the details of Joe Barry, I do think it's in the context of not just, hey, we hired a new defensive coordinator, but looking at it in the context of, moving forward, looking at the team for next year, and part of that is looking back at, why did we get rid of Mike Pettin? Um, you brought it up before. Statistically speaking, technically we had a top 10 defense yardage wise this year. I think we were 13th in scoring. Um, Similar performance the prior year. I actually think we improved a bit this year.
yeah,
Um, so it's not like his defenses were awful, and they did get us to the NFC Championship game 2 years in a row. And Mike, if you look, we're looking at Joe Barry's previous stints in the NFL and not really being too inspired by it. If you looked at Mike Pettin, he had a long list of top 10 defenses on his resume. So that was something that we could get excited about. We lived with Dom Capers for like 3 years too long. And so when Mike Pettin came to town, I was pretty excited.
I was
Uh,
excited about him too.
Ultimately, I think what it ended up being is just it, the philosophy wasn't right. He's not an aggressive coach. Matt LaFleur is. And you saw them argue sometimes, and you saw sometimes in LaFleur's press conferences, he wasn't really looking out for his defensive coordinator.
Mm-mm.
Um, so I think it's good to keep that in mind as we look at this Joe Barry hire, that a lot of it is about the philosophy. And Joe Barry, he's worked in a number of systems. Like, yes, he is going to. The plan is to implement this Vic Fangio system, but he's worked in 4-3 cover twos. He's worked in the 3-4 Vic Fangio. What he did with the Rams was kind of unique. They did like a 3-3-5 kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a wealth of experience in different systems, and his positional coaching history. He has developed some really good linebackers. I mean, you go back to his Tampa Bay days. He worked with like Derek Brooks, who was in
Mm-hmm.
defensive player of the year. Chargers, I think he worked with Melvin Ingram there. Rams, he developed like
Corey Littleton.
Corey Littleton and Alec Ogletree. So he's worked well positionally. But yeah, the resume as a defensive coordinator, it is not favorable compared to Mike Patton. So this is clearly a hire about philosophy and attitude, where Patton and LaFleur weren't on the same wavelength. LaFleur personally knows Joe Barry, so I think that's a big part of it. But yeah, I'll let you go on. I just wanted to
Yeah,
throw that
you make a
perspective.
good point. And what you just mentioned also popped in. A thought that popped in my head was after this podcast, I want to go back into his into the staff of those Detroit and Washington teams during those years and see who his positional coaches were. At the moment, it appears that we're keeping the same positional coaches intact that we did under Patton. We're just changing the defensive coordinator. Um, I'm wondering if any of his positional coaches in Detroit, Washington went on to be like successful defensive coordinators where they fizzled out because the company that you keep has a lot to say it too. Like you could be the best guy in the room, but if you don't have good help around you in both coaches and players, you'll fail. So as you said, when you start talking about philosophy, that's what made me start to think about the coaches as well as the players around them. Because I really like what Jerry Gray did with our secondary. I like what Mike Smith does with the outside linebackers. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so
So you made me think of two things there. Talking about the company that you keep. So Joe Barry is Rod Marinelli's son-in-law.
yep.
Rod Marinelli, famously not a very good head coach with the Detroit Lions, but he has coached a number of talented, aggressive defenses in his career,
Hmm.
and his uh, expertise has always been the defensive line. Um, I believe he played a big role in developing Nagamaton Sue.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, there's that Rod Marinelli connection there, and Lord knows we could use some better coaching on the defensive line. Not coaching up anyone other than Kenny
Hmm.
Clark. Uh, but at the same time, yeah, I don't necessarily want to see us lose guys like Jerry Gray and Mike Smith. Uh, you know, they've done some pretty good work developing young players. Um, and I read an opinion piece, or actually it was just a comment from someone that I found kind of interesting. If we had moved on from Mike Patton mid-season, audition Jerry Gray to see if he was the guy. Now there's a chance we could lose him. Like he could get
Yeah.
go, he could be poached by someone else. And we never really got to see if he would be the guy. And it's interesting that he wasn't in serious consideration for the coordinator position. Like we interviewed him, but it really seemed to be down to Leonard and Barry. And for whatever reason, we didn't even try to interview anyone from the Bucks staff, even though they
Hmm.
beat the Saints and us and the Chiefs all rather convincingly. I mean, not necessarily convincingly with us, but their defense is pretty nasty. I would have
Yeah.
liked to have had an interview with someone there. They seem aggressive. But Joe Barry's the guy. Um,
We're gonna fucking live and die with him. So, I mean, I'm pulling for him. I don't want him to do bad, but
yeah,
who
and I mean,
knows?
if we can keep Jerry Gray and Mike Smith, maybe we have some continuity, which that could be good, and maybe we have a nice mix of ideas. I do really like this idea of running the Vic Fangio system.
Hmm.
I mean, that system has had a lot of excellent defenses over the years, defenses that Aaron Rodgers respects. Um, my only question though is like, you couldn't get a guy directly from the Vic Fangio tree. Like you couldn't go and find someone on the Broncos staff or someone on the Bears staff who still had Fangio connections. Like Joe Barry doesn't. It seems kind of like a second hand learning of it.
Yeah,
Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he's ever directly worked with Vic Fangio.
I don't believe so either. Um, I think he's just relying on Joe Barry to have learned from his, you know, other experiences, and he he just likes what the Rams are doing with their defense. And I think he's really banking on Joe Barry just being able to kind of mimic what he sees um, Staley doing, the current defensive coordinator, and what McVay wants him to do. Um, I not even in addition to his defensive coordinator outings, I wasn't really thrilled about the fact that the McVay and the Rams passed on him twice in the last like 3 years. They've had two defense corner openings, and not only did Joe Barry not get picked for their openings, but McVay let him leave to go to. He wasn't going to be on the Rams next year. He accepted to be the
He took a job with the
Chargers.
Chargers
Yeah,
when Brandon Staley left for that head coaching position. Um, and then we came along and hired him. I mean, I Lafleur is my understanding is that he is close friends with Sean McVay, so they
yep,
probably
he
candid
is. He
discussions
was in
about
his
him.
wedding party, so yeah.
Um, and I have to think. So I remember with the Matt Lafleur hiring, at first, the first thing I said is, "Wow, man, he must have like knocked that interview out of the park because his resume doesn't really scream like the better than Josh McDaniels. That
Hmm.
was a guy a lot of people were hoping for. Uh, and it turned out well. Like the brass made a great decision with the Matt Lafleur hire. And the first thing I thought with this Joe Barry hire, after I processed the horrible stats of his past defenses, is like he must have had some really, really good answers about
Yeah.
learning from past mistakes, and he must have been able to specifically demonstrate and give examples of like I made a mistake here. This is how I learned from it, and this is something that I implemented to change it. So maybe third time's the charm with Joe Barry, and having some more talented players will make the difference because we do
Yeah.
kind of mess up with that Rams like Jair Alexander is our Jalen Ramsey. Kenny Clark
Yep.
is our Aaron Donald. And then, you know, we've we might have more talent than the Rams defense overall when you throw in Zadarius and Gary and Savage and Amos.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, philosophy wise, he fits what I think LaFleur is looking for. Former players say he's passionate and smart. Um, if you remember Ricky Jean Francois, former Packer and Washington Redskin, um, formerly Washington Redskin, used to came out and said when asked about Joe Barry, said that his philosophy is to rush four down linemen and then drop seven into the secondary. That's his ideal scenario. Now I feel like that's every defense coordinator's ideal scenario and what they want to do though. So it's kind of like a duh type answer, but that does seem to be the formula now for what is going to win you a Super Bowl. Like that's how you beat Tom Brady. That's how you beat Pat Mahomes. But you got to have the horses to be able to do it though.
Yeah, and that's the
So
thing, man. Like if we want to run a defense like that, we need at least one more impact player on the defensive line. Um, which maybe this transitions into our
I
next
was going to
part.
say, actually, what I'm starting to talk about right now really kind of sets us up for a really good transition into this next slide.
Because
So,
I'll tell you this, man. Rookie defensive linemen very, very rarely are impact players. Even
well, you
Chase
saw
Young,
Rashawn Gary.
rookie of the year, he didn't even have 10 sacks.
Yeah.
Um, it takes those young guys time to grow. I don't want to rely on a defensive lineman rookie who's probably not even going to be selected in the first round to be our game changer. I want to rely on a proven veteran.
And we don't really, it's going to be tough to just go get one like a young, good one right now. So,
Well, I know an old good one who has some personal connections to the state of Wisconsin.
are you talking about JJ Watt, who
I
is the
am, I
new
am.
recently released JJ Watt?
That is the man I am talking about. We made the mistake of passing on his younger brother for Kevin King.
Mm,
Let's not make the same mistake
I
twice,
was
man.
gonna, I was gonna make do some lip service to that. Oh, R.I.P. Ted Thompson. You did a lot of good things in your tenure here, but the way things have unfolded have really. It does appear from the rumor mill that the two biggest destinations that Vegas sees them going to is either Pittsburgh because his brothers play there, or Green Bay because it's his hometown and his alma mater, the Badgers. Don't you think that his decision would have been just about super easy if we would have just drafted TJ Watt over Kevin King, the same Kevin King who isn't even going to get a contract extension because of his inconsistency, his injury history, and oh, by the way, completely blowing it in the biggest game of his career in a contract year and being a major reason why we didn't go to the Super Bowl that year. Oh, by the way, you only took him over like the reigning defensive player of the year, the next all world talent, like just as good as JJ in his prime, TJ Watt right now. Like,
Yeah, I don't even want to harp on that, man, because that'll just upset me. But I do want to say so. All right, so JJ Watt's the dream. Is it going to happen? A lot
is
would
he the
have.
dream though? He's 32, going on 33. He's only had one
All
productive
right, all right, all
season
right,
in the
all right.
last four.
Let's get into it. Let's get into it, man. So a lot of people say that JJ Watt is washed up, man. Uh, he first of all, his leadership and intangibles. Can you name a leader on our defense right now, other than maybe Jair? Like nobody else
I
shows
don't
the
even know if I would
fight.
say Jair's. I wouldn't say he's actually a leader more so as he's just passionate. He brings an attitude to the defense. I would say that the leader of defense probably is Darius.
Yeah, but dude, even to Darius, like sometimes I don't know,
I think
sometimes like he'll go out there and dance and do all this shit after a sack, and the rest of the defense is just kind of like, come on, let's get back to the
no,
play.
I do agree. JJ would bring the type of attitude the defense needs,
All right,
like
so he
the
would bring
no
his attitude.
nonsense,
He would
like a
bring a
no
hunger.
nonsense.
He'd bring a
Yeah.
hunger. The guy's never been past the divisional round in the playoffs, and also physically speaking, he's not washed up. I read that I think it was using Pro Football Focus their ratings. He was like the 15th ranked
Defensive end.
rush win rate last year.
Oh
He
yeah.
still got it. That's as the primary focal point that every offense is game planning for. You put him next to Kenny Clark. You got Zadarius Smith and Rashawn Gary. And
Hmm.
dude, JJ
There,
Watt,
there's your
he
four
could
man
be
rush.
he could be stout for us. He could
Yeah.
be stout for us. To me, and if you want to argue that, I'll hear you out. But to me, if you take the financials out of it, I'm 100% sold that adding one of the generational players on the ball team.
I would. I mean, we're all speculating right now, right? We don't know for sure. I think JJ Watt could be the Julius Peppers type signing. Julius Peppers was a leader. He still produced like 10 plus sack seasons for us. Did fall off at the end, but I mean, his first couple years were amazing here. He could be that type of a sign for us. Not to mention, he fits the Vic Fangio system pretty good. He's arguably the most dominant 3-4 defensive end in NFL history. Vic Fangio runs a three. The Vic Fangio system runs a 3-4. So we could put, Kenny and JJ as the down lineman, and then
Yeah, and,
rush.
and then that also allows Kingsley Kiki room to grow, man. If
Yeah.
you got Kenny and JJ,
Hmm.
Kiki's gonna have one-on-ones all the time,
Yeah.
especially with Darius and Gary on the edge. Like it,
So
I think it opens up a lot of things for the defense. So I don't know. I mean, what we really need to talk about here is the financials, and it's
yeah,
interesting that Vegas says, they're picking like Pittsburgh as the most likely, and
Pittsburgh's got some cap issues too,
it's in a
but
very
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's where I can't like. That's where it's gonna be tough to keep speculating because we just don't know what JJ is looking for financially, and we don't know what he's willing to compromise. We don't even know who he's like, even if he's like talking to us. We assume he is, but I don't know. Is he looking to literally? How big of a discount would he be willing to take to come play for a contender? They say that he wants to play for a contender, but they're not saying he's willing to take a discount to play for one. So I don't know. Ideally, I don't think he plays for the vet minimum. I just don't see it happening. But if we could somehow get him to sign with us, like cut Preston Smith, and if he's willing to play for the money that we would have paid Preston Smith, which would have been between like 6 to 8 million, I think, and then restructure Rodgers' deal and extend Adams and try to get under the cap that way. If we can make that work, yeah, I would take JJ for between 6 to 8 million, but he was going to make 17 and a half this year. I don't know. Is he willing to play for half of his
so
cap?
to me, I mean, the guy's made a lot of money, and I think it's pretty clear, and he's kind of voiced it. He wants to play for a contender. He wants to chase a Super Bowl, and there aren't very many teams that are realistically in position for a Super Bowl where he might be the guy that puts him over the top. A lot of people connect him to the Steelers because of his brothers, but dude, the Steelers, like, are they really a Super Bowl team? They just lost their starting center to retirement. Big Ben's another year older and, not getting any better. They have zero run game. Like, yeah, their defense is pretty good, but I don't think the Steelers are the best team in their division, man.
Yeah.
They got to deal with the Ravens and the Browns. Oh yeah, and you got to get through Patrick Mahomes to get to the Super Bowl. I mean, you look. I kind of feel like the real contenders are, the Steelers and
The
situation, but we're probably a better shot to get to the Super Bowl. Uh, and then I also consider like the Bills and Tampa. Um,
Bills, Tampa, and Cleveland, as well as Pittsburgh, are the teams I think he could go to.
I think Bills are. I could definitely see the Bills coming through with it because I know
The
they have a
Bills
little.
are in a much better cap situation than other teams there. In fact, it's funny. Tampa and Buffalo are in pretty decent cap space where like situations where they could pretty easily absorb JJ, and they could probably pay him a lot more than what Pittsburgh or Green Bay could probably. Like that's where I feel like there could be a kicker. Like they're both Tampa just won the Super Bowl. Buffalo just fell one game short of the Super Bowl. They could not only he could not only go to a Super Bowl contender with those teams, but he could also get paid a lot more, a whole lot more than what Green Bay or Pittsburgh could probably pay him, I think, too. So
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few factors to consider here. I mean, Tampa is a pretty appealing destination just because. So they just won the Super Bowl. They're loaded with talent. They can pay you. The state doesn't have income tax. It's warm. There's a lot going for it. But at the same time, it doesn't really give JJ the opportunity to say, I'm the one who put you over the top. I was the difference maker. It's more like he's coming along for the ride and it's almost like charity. I don't
it
know if he
depends.
wants that, man.
It depends what his mentality is.
Oh yeah, and I think that's what it all comes down to is what he's personally looking for. Whereas like if he's a nostalgic guy, if he's sentimental, Green Bay might be the best place for him. Because I
Mhm.
think we do have a better Super Bowl shot than Pittsburgh. So us and Pittsburgh are probably the two sentimental options, and then Tampa and Buffalo are probably the two like you have a shot to win and get paid. I just for some reason I don't see it being Tampa. I don't think he wants to go be an afterthought. I think he'd rather be a seen as a difference maker, and I think he could do that with Buffalo or the Packers or the Steelers.
I mean, I've been trying to crunch numbers for the last 48 hours here, looking at stuff. Me personally, I've been having a hard time just trying to get us under the cap just to be able to re-sign our free agent or our rookie class, as well as maybe sign some like bargain basement free agent guys who've been sitting on the market like 2 weeks after free agency opens, just to be able to do that. Man, I'm having a hard time just doing that. I just if he wants anything more than 5, 6, 7 million a year, I don't know how we can reasonably financially do it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you could probably easily do it, but if you completely restructure Rogers' contract and move all that money towards the rest of it, towards the rest of his deal, but by doing that, you are basically saying like "f you" to Jordan Love. There's no way that Jordan Love sees the field until maybe his fifth year. Then, so I mean, I don't know that like this offseason, what they do with Rogers' contract in this offseason is going to tell us uh, what their intentions are with Rogers. If they completely restructure his deal and backload it, they can't cut him or trade him because the cap hit is going to be so damn high that it'll just be like setting a bomb off to their cap.
See,
So
I'm gonna disagree with you here. I think that well, so first of all, I do want to say we've already restructured David Bakhtiari just earlier tonight, and that frees up about 8 million in cap space. So like there are ways to come up with money, and I definitely think that said, I don't think it's going to be a like we're force committing to Rodgers and screwing over Love. I think that the team, because you save so much money when you switch from MVP of the league quarterback to a rookie contract quarterback, I could see us structuring contracts so that we have like a 2-year window, and then in year 3 it's cap hell. You're not signing anyone, you're cutting guys, but you're also like, even if Rogers has a $35 million cap hit, a lot of people would say that's untradeable. I don't necessarily think so, because say you trade Rogers $35 million, you're also like probably saving that much by, you're probably saving $25 million by switching to Jordan Love. I think they can structure it so that the first year of the Jordan Love era, we don't have any money, but it's okay because his contract is so cheap. And then after that, you can start building around him.
Yeah, maybe that's what they do. I'm not sure. I, I do know that Russ Ball and Brian Gutekunst going to be making their money this offseason. They got some tough decisions to make. Goot did come out and say that he's going to try to be aggressive this offseason. What better way to show your, put your money where your mouth is and then go out and go get JJ Watt, like,
Dude, I mean, what would invigorate the team more, and invigorate Rogers as well. The commitment to Rogers, I don't necessarily think it all has to be financial. I don't necessarily think that he's out there saying we need to get my contract structured so that you can't trade me. He might just want to know I have a certain window of time. And what a better way to do that than getting a guy like JJ Watt.
you know what? I do think bringing a guy like JJ Watt could do wonders with the team morale, because a big concern of mine is you just had back-to-back 13-3 years and you lost in the AFC Championship both years. Man, for some of them players who were on the team both years, that might just like eat at you, and you might, like, I'm afraid of coming out in week 1, week 2, week 3 and just being flat, just being like just starting slow. Bringing in JJ Watt can kind of do the opposite, be like, all right, you guys, back-to-back years, we're almost there, we can taste it, I'm doing everything I can, like, we're gonna bring in like the best player we can to help get us over that hump. And what better guy than JJ Watt,
I mean, I get excited talking about it. I would love to see it happen. Realistically,
what do you think it's good? What do you think chances are, though? I was gonna say, like, what's the percentage you think this happens?
25%.
I was gonna go 10.
Yeah, I realistically, it's probably not going to happen. It's exciting to talk about it. Exciting to speculate.
I think we
could probably do a separate podcast once the cap number is set.
Yeah.
Where we look at viable free agent options, bargain guys. I recently read something about Solomon Thomas, where he could be he'd definitely be an upgrade over the defensive ends we have right now. I don't know what kind of money he'd be looking for, but
he's been disappointing, so probably he won't break the bank. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's probably worth doing a free agency podcast once the cap is set. But right now, dude, I would be, for as gutted as I was after that championship loss, which frankly we should have won that game. If we could go into next year with a guy like JJ Watt, that would give me a lot of confidence and excitement for the coming year.
Yeah, that's the type of thing that would just kind of help me not think about what happened in the last game, and I could focus on be more optimistic towards the upcoming season. You can start to daydream about that 4-man rush with Watt and Clark and Z and Gary, and who knows, who knows, maybe we find a way to hold on to Preston Smith too and add him into that rotation somehow or something, so who knows, man. But yeah, this will probably just about wrap it up here for this off-season podcast. We'll be coming at you again in a little while with our off-season podcast here. We'll be talking more about some some free agent targets, as well as looking ahead towards the draft. Maybe potentially talking about JJ Watt's role in Green Bay if he ends up signing with us. Who knows? But just providing you with analysis and updates on the Packers offseason moves as they go along. Because for many, as well as I can say for me too, the offseason is sometimes just as exciting and thrilling as the regular season itself. So
Man, I know I never miss a draft night. Man, a draft night to me is it's like right behind the playoffs as far as excitement goes.
right, yeah. Um, I will be probably writing some blogs here about some prospects as well as coming up with my own mock draft here, which is something I've never done. So I'm looking forward to researching these players and coming up with my own mock draft here with the Packers. We're projected to have 10 picks here. Where I think we're projected to get comp picks in the fourth, fifth, and sixth round, which will push us up to 10 draft picks, which is more than enough ammo for Goot to move up in any of the rounds to snag a player he really wants. I don't see us taking a quarterback in the first round this year, but hey, you never know.
Hey man, if Trevor Lawrence falls,
Who knows?
Hey, no, actually, I want to say something real quick that just popped into my mind when you mentioned comp picks, and it had me thinking out to next year, because most likely we lose Lindsley, Jones,
Mm-hmm.
King, um,
Jones.
not count against the comp pick formula if he were signed. And the Packers organization in the past, they have shown to like that kind of free agent signing
Mm-hmm.
because they definitely value their comp picks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should by losing them players, we should be looking at some really good comp picks. I don't think you can get a second round comp pick, but I think third. There, I mean, there's a chance
Probably
we can
more.
get.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance we can get potentially 2/3 depending on these deals. Jones and Lindsley are going to break the bank. Williams should get a good deal. King could probably get a pretty decent deal too. Um, those are some pretty high quality free agents that some teams are going to be signing. So we're going to be looking good for some comp picks here next year as well. So yeah. Well, all right, my friend. This has been fun. It's good talking to you. I'm glad it's on better terms than the last time we did this. So
Yeah, I hate to be the guy, but before we end it, I just have to bring it up. Um, Tom Brady's dominant. I was looking at all-time Super Bowl appearances, so he's been in 10 Super Bowls, winning 7 of them. The next closest guy in terms of overall appearances is John Elway, appeared in 5 Super Bowls. He only won 2 of them. So Brady
oh,
has literally been to double the Super Bowls as the next closest guy, and he's won more.
his
One
dominance
more
is just
than
unmatched,
overall
dude.
appearances for the next closest guy.
It's unmatched. He is the. I remember listening to Romo during the Super Bowl. Who Romo was really bullish on the fact that Mahomes could somehow someday like match Brady's Super Bowl wins or something like that. But he basically said like by beating Mahomes in the Super Bowl this year, he's like, there's no way Mahomes with his one now and Brady at 7. Like he's like, I just don't see Mahomes ever getting like 6 or 7 more. Like,
Yeah, I mean it's just unprecedented.
yeah,
And I I look at it like, if I'm gonna lose in the playoffs, I would rather lose to the best. Like I know some people
mm,
destroyed for some vengeance, but if I'm gonna lose, I want to lose to the best, and Tom Brady is the best of all time. I just hope that motherfucker retires soon. We
uh,
get home.
he did say that he sees himself playing past 45. He's 43 now. We could be looking at, and he's going to sign a contract. His contract's up after this next season, and they're talking to him about signing a contract extension. So probably another 2-year deal on top of this 1 year. So we're
Yeah,
looking
but
at
dude, you got to remember Peyton Manning, in 2013, had perhaps the greatest passing season in history, and 2 years later, he was benched for Brock Osweiler for part of the season. So when Father Time catches up, it comes fast. So
yeah. Um, Brady's really supported by just having. I mean, as good as Brady is, he is kind of like a role player a little bit now at the moment. He relies more on his brain than his actual like talent. I feel like he's just so smart. He's like a head coach out there in the field. He's got he's got studs across the board, every position.
Yeah,
So
dude. I mean, you give that offensive and defensive line to Rodgers, and we're winning the Super Bowl.
easily. Speaking of Raj, I was gonna share this with you off the podcast, but it's just better to share it with you. It's just an odd piece of information I found today. Did you know that for the second year in a row, Aaron Rodgers' receivers lost the most yards in the league to drops? This year, we left 552 yards off the table by wide receiver drops this year. So
Big
add
chunk of that was probably MVS.
552 yards onto that thing. Rodgers easily would have had over 50 touchdowns this year. Would have been sniffing about, I think, like 4,800 yards passing with that. That was also 552 yards missed by drops, was more than 100 yards than the second highest team in the league, by the way. Like,
Yeah.
thanks, MVS. But I will give you props, MVS.
When we do our off-season podcast, I'd like to talk about MBS. The receivers in general. There's a conversation to be had there.
Sure is. We'll be playing that soon here. We'll let some more off-season stuff play out here, you guys. We'll wait till we get a little bit more content, and we'll be back with you guys soon here, another month or so. So, Cody, this was fun. Looking forward to the next one, dude.
Likewise, brother.
All right. Cheers, you guys. Till next time.